The CNN studio fell dead silent as Candace Owens raised her hand, cutting off Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett mid-sentence. What happened in the next 30 seconds will become the most viral political moment of the year. With over 50 million views across all platforms, Crockett had been confidently explaining her latest police reform bill when Owens pulled out a stack of papers that nobody knew existed. The look on Crockett's face when she saw those documents, pure shock, and what Owens revealed next left the entire panel speechless and changed the conversation about progressive politics forever. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of these jaw-dropping political moments. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The studio lights blazed hot as both women sat across from each other at the CNN debate table. Crockett, the 33-year-old Texas Democrat, wore her signature bold red blazer, confident, smile never wavering. Owens, 34, sat poised in navy blue, her conservative audience watching eagerly from social media. Neither woman knew they were about to engage in political combat that would dominate headlines for weeks. What made this confrontation so devastating wasn't just a surprise factor. It was a month of careful preparation that Owens had invested while Crockett remained blissfully unaware of the trap being set. Political insiders later revealed that Owens had been tracking Crockett's media appearances for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike when the Congresswoman would be most confident and least prepared for serious scrutiny. The timing was strategic brilliance. Crockett had just returned from a successful fundraising tour where she'd been celebrated as the future of progressive politics. Her social media engagement was at an all-time high in mainstream media outlets were treating her as the Democratic Party's rising star. She walked into that CNN studio expecting another friendly platform to promote her agenda, completely unaware that she was walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush. To understand why this confrontation hit so hard, you need to know exactly who these two powerhouse women are and why. Their clash represents something much bigger than just a TV debate. Jasmine Crockett had been riding high for months. The Dallas representative elected in 2022 quickly became the progressive movement's rising star. At just 33, she'd already made waves with her fiery speeches about criminal justice reform and her viral TikTok videos that garnered millions of views. Her background as a civil rights attorney gave her credibility, and her social media savvy made her the perfect face for Gen Z progressive politics. Crockett grew up in St. Louis, worked her way through law school, and built her reputation defending clients against police brutality cases. Why? She wasn't just another politician. She was someone who'd actually fought the system from the ground up. Her supporters loved her authenticity, her willingness to call out injustice, and her ability to break down complex legal issues into digestible social media content. But success had made Crockett confident, maybe too confident. She dominated every TV appearance for months, rarely facing serious pushback from interviewers who seemed more interested in her viral moments than challenging her policies. The media treated her like the future of the Democratic Party, and frankly, she'd started believing her own hype. On the other side sat Candace Owens, the conservative commentator who built her career on challenging exactly the kind of progressive narratives that Crockett represented. Owens had her own remarkable story. Growing up in Connecticut, facing real racism as a teenager, then shocking everyone by becoming one of the most prominent black conservative voices in America. Owens wasn't just some talking head. She'd authored best-selling books, built a media empire, and had direct access to the highest levels of conservative politics. Her Daily Wire show reached millions, and her ability to dismantle liberal arguments with facts and data had made her a fear debater among progressives. While Crockett was riding high on media praise, Owens had been quietly doing her homework. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just a routine CNN panel discussion. With the 2024 election cycle heating up, both women represented the future of their respective movements. Crockett embodied the young, diverse, social media-savvy progressive wing that Democrats hoped would energize their base. Owens represented the new generation of conservative women of color who were challenging the left monopoly on identity. Politics. CNN had billed this as a discussion about criminal justice reform, but everyone in that studio knew it was really about something much bigger. Which vision of America will win a battle for hearts and minds? The young progressive who promised systemic change, or the conservative who argued the system needed defending, not destroying. The topic was police reform, specifically Crockett's latest bill that would redirect federal funding from police departments to community programs. It was Crockett's signature issue, the one that had made her famous. And she'd never lost a debate about it. She walked into that CNN studio expecting another easy victory, another viral moment to add to her highlight reel. Owens had other plans. The tension started building the moment CNN host Anderson Cooper introduced the topic. Crockett launched into her well-rehearsed talking points about systemic racism and police brutality, her voice rising with passion as she described communities under siege. "We cannot continue to fund institutions that terrorize our communities," Crockett declared, looking directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who'd given this speech 100 times. "My bill redirects just 15% of federal police funding toward mental health services, education, and community development. This isn't radical, it's common sense." The CNN panel nodded along. This was familiar territory, the kind of progressive messaging that typically went unchallenged on mainstream media. Crockett supporters watching on social media started flooding the comments with fire emojis and praise. Everything was going according to script. But then Owens leaned forward, and something in her expression made Crockett pause. "Congresswoman Crockett," Owens said, her voice calm but carrying an edge, "I find it interesting that you're talking about community safety while representing a district where violent crime has increased 23% since she took office." Crockett's smile flickered for just a moment. This wasn't the usual softball question she was used to, but she recovered quickly, pivoting to her standard response about root causes and systemic issues. "Candace, what you're failing to understand is that crime is a symptom of deeper problems," Crockett replied, her voice taking on a condescending tone she often used with conservative critics when communities lack investment in education, mental health, and economic opportunity. "Of course, you see social problems. That's exactly why my bill let me stop you right there," Owens interrupted, reaching into a folder, "because I think the American people deserve to hear some facts before you continue with your talking points." The panel shifted uncomfortably. Cooper tried to maintain control, but the energy in her room had suddenly changed. Crockett's confident demeanor faltered slightly as she watched Owens shuffle through what appeared to be research documents. The studio lights seemed to intensify the moment, casting sharp shadows across both women's faces. Crockett supporters in the audience exchanged worried glances, sensing that something had shifted dramatically from the expected narrative. This wasn't the typical CNN panel where progressive talking points went unchallenged. Owens took her time organizing her papers, a tactical move that built tension while demonstrating her preparation level. Each document was precisely placed, creating a visual representation of the methodical case she was about to present. The deliberate pacing made it clear this wasn't spontaneous attack, but a carefully orchestrated dismantling. "You talk about lack of investment," Owens continued, "but Dallas County, which includes your district, received over $50 million in federal community development grants last year. That's money that was supposed to go to exactly the programs you're talking about. So my question is, where did that money go?" Crockett's eyes narrowed. This wasn't in her prep materials. Her staff had briefed her on Owens' usual talking points, but this felt different, more specific, more dangerous. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Candace," Crockett said, her voice taking on defensive edge. "But federal grants go through state and local agencies. As a federal representative, I don't directly control, but you do influence how they're allocated." Owens shot back, pulling out what looked like official documents, "especially when your husband's nonprofit consulting firm received a $1, $2, $2 million contract to facilitate community engagement for those exact grants." The silence in the studio was deafening. Cooper's eyes widened. The other panelists exchanged glances. Crockett's face went pale. That's completely irrelevant," Crockett stammered, but her usual confidence had evaporated. "My husband's business operates independently of my congressional work. There's no conflict of interest," Owens smiled, but wasn't friendly. "No conflict of interest. Your husband's firm got paid over $1 million to consult on programs that you're now saying failed so badly that we need to defund the police. Either the programs worked and you're lying about the crime problem, or they failed and your family profited from that failure. Which is it?" The studio erupted. Cooper tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Crockett was visibly shaken, her usual poise completely gone. She looked like someone who'd walked into What she thought was a friendly conversation only to discover it was an ambush. This is exactly the kind of personal attack that conservatives always resort to, Crockett said, trying to regain her footing. Instead of debating policy, you're attacking my family, but Owens wasn't finished. She pulled out another document, and Crockett's eyes filled. With something that looked suspiciously like panic personal attack, Owens said, her voice rising slightly. Congresswoman, this is your own financial disclosure form filed with the House Ethics Committee. Public record your husband's income from government. Contracts increased by 400% a year after you took office. Is that a coincidence? The CNN panel was in chaos now. Cooper was frantically trying to go to commercial break, but the confrontation had taken on a life of its own. Social media was exploding. In real time, with clips already being shared across Twitter and TikTok, Crockett made a fatal error. Instead of addressing the documents, she got personal. You know what? Candace, this is rich coming from you, a woman who built her entire career on being the token black conservative, telling white people what they want to hear about black communities. You've never lived in the communities. You're criticizing you've never faced the police brutality that stopped. Owens said, her voice cutting through. Crockett's words, like a blade, just stopped. The entire studio went silent. Something in Owens' tone suggested that Crockett had just made a terrible mistake. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media, analyzed by political commentators for weeks, and remembered as the moment Candace Owens delivered one of the most devastating political takedowns in recent memory. Owens stood up slowly. Her documents spread across the table like evidence in courtroom when she spoke. Her voice was controlled, measured, and absolutely lethal. Congresswoman Crockett, you just made this personal. So let's talk about personal experience. She picked up a photograph from her folder and held it up with the cameras to see it. Showed a young black woman in a hospital bed, face swollen and bruised. This is me at 17 years old after I was being unconscious by 3 white men in Stamford, Connecticut. They left me for dead in a parking lot. The police, they told my family it was probably my fault, so don't you dare lecture me about police brutality. The studio was dead silent. Crockett's mouth fell open. This wasn't in any of her opposition research, but here's the difference between us. Owen continued, her voice gaining strength, that experience taught me that the system has problems, but it also taught me that there are good cops who care about justice. It taught me that solutions come from building bridges, not burning them down. It taught me that real change comes from accountability. Not just anger. She reached for another document, and Crockett visibly flinched. You want to talk about lived experience? Let's talk about your lived experience. You grew up in University City, Missouri. Median household income $65. 0. You went to private schools? Your father was a successful businessman? Your mother was a college professor? You've never lived in the communities that your policies claim to help. Owens walked around the table now, her presence commanding the entire studio, but let's get back to those documents since you seem so eager to avoid discussing them. Your husband's consulting firm didn't just get one contract. Over the past 2 years, his company has received over $3.2 million in contracts related 2 community development programs in your district, programs that have demonstrably failed to reduce crime or improve outcomes. She spread out financial documents across the table, each one damning Crockett further. Here's the invoice for $250. 0 for community engagement workshops that consisted of 2 PowerPoint presentations. Here's another for $180,000 for cultural competency training. That was literally just your husband reading from a manual he bought online. And here's my personal favorite, for $100. 0 for holistic community healing sessions that turned out to be yoga classes in a community center. The CNN panel was transfixed. Cooper had given up any pretense of controlling the segment. This was television gold and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, Owens continued, while your family was getting rich off failed community programs, violent crime in your district increased by 23%. Property crime increased by 31%. Small businesses are closing at record rates. The very communities you claim to champion are suffering while you and your husband profit from their pain. Crockett tried to interrupt, but Owens held up her hand. I'm not finished, because there's more. Your bill. This police reform bill that you're so proud of, it includes a provision that would steer even more federal funding toward the exact type of community consulting programs that your husband's firm specializes in. You're not just profiting from failure. You're trying to institutionalize it, The devastation was complete. Crockett sat slumped in her chair. All of her earlier confidence evaporated. Her usual fire was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone who'd been caught red-handed. "This isn't about police reform," Owens said, her voice rising to a crescendo. "This is about you and your family using progressive rhetoric to enrich yourselves while the communities you claim to represent continue to suffer. You're not a champion of justice, you're a grifter in designer clothing." The studio erupted. The other panelists were talking over each other. Cooper was shouting for order, but all eyes were on Crockett, who sat in stunned silence, completely destroyed. She tried one last desperate counterattack. "This ISIL lies and personal attacks. Candace is just trying to lies," Owens interrupted, holding up an official document. "This is your husband's business registration file with the state of Texas. It lists you as a strategic advisor to a consulting firm. So either you lied on federal disclosure forms, or you've been actively involved in a business that profits from the very programs you're now saying don't work." Game over. Crockett had no response. For the first time in her political career, she was completely speechless. The woman who built her reputation on fiery rhetoric and quick comebacks had been reduced to silence by Candace Owens' methodical presentation of facts. The American people deserve better than politicians who profit from problems instead of solving them, Owens concluded, gathering her documents with the satisfaction of someone who just delivered a knockout punch. And they especially deserve better than politicians who hide behind identity politics while enriching themselves at their constituents' expense. The segment ended with Crockett still sitting in stunned silence, her political career potentially in ruins, while Owens stood victorious, having delivered one of the most complete demolitions of a political opponent in television history. The immediate aftermath in the CNN studio was electric with tension. As the camera stopped rolling, the other panelists sat in awkward silence, unsure how to process what they just witnessed. Anderson Cooper, a veteran of countless political confrontations, later described it as one of the most uncomfortable moments in his broadcasting career. Crockett remained in her chair for several minutes after the segment ended, staring blankly at the documents Owens had spread across the table. Her staff, watching from the green room, were reportedly in complete panic mode, frantically making phone calls to damage control specialists and legal advisors. Owens, by contrast, calmly collected her papers with the methodical precision of a prosecutor who had just secured a conviction. She exchanged brief pleasantries with Cooper and the other panelists, but her demeanor suggested she understood exactly what she had accomplished and the magnitude of its political implications. The studio audience, which had been electric with tension during the confrontation, buzzed with whispered conversations as people processed what they'd witnessed. Many were already pulling out their phones to share clips and reactions on social media, understanding instinctively that they had just watched a career-defining moment for both women, involved the fallout from Candace Owens' destruction of Jasmine Crockett began before the CNN segment even ended. Social media exploded with clips, analysis, and reactions that would dominate political discourse for weeks to come. Within minutes of the confrontation, #Owens destroys Jasminette was trending on Twitter with over 200 tweets in the first hour alone. The clip of Owens laying out the financial documents while Crockett sat in stunned silence was shared across every platform, racking up millions of views faster than CNN's social media team could track conservative. Twitter erupted in celebration. Charlie Kirk tweeted, "Candace Owens just delivered the most devastating political takedown I've ever witnessed. This is why facts matter more than feelings." The tweet garnered over 50,000 likes in 20 minutes. Ben Shapiro's reaction was swift and brutal. "This is what happens when progressive rhetoric meets actual research." Crockett just learned that emotions can't overcome evidence. His clip breakdown of the confrontation hit over 2 million views in 6 hours, but it wasn't just conservative commentators celebrating. Even mainstream media figures seemed stunned by the thoroughness of Owens' preparation. CNN's own Jake Tapper tweeted, "Regardless of political affiliation, what we just witnessed was exceptional journalism and fact-checking in real time. The documents Owens had presented were quickly verified by independent fact checkers." The Washington Post, no friend to conservative causes, confirmed that Crockett's husband's consulting firm had indeed received over $3 $2 million in government contracts related to community development programs in her district. The timing, the amounts, and the lack of measurable outcomes were all exactly as Owens had described. More damaging details emerged throughout the evening. Investigative journalists, smelling blood in the water, began digging deeper into the Crockett family's finances. By midnight, reports surfaced that the couple had purchased a $1.8 million home in an upscale Dallas suburb just months after the largest consulting contracts were awarded. The progressive response was a mixture of damage control and desperate deflection. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is exactly the kind of personal destruction that the right wing uses to silence strong black women in politics," but even her supporters seem less enthusiastic than usual, with a tweet receiving significantly fewer likes and retweets than her typical posts. More tellingly, several prominent progressive voices remained conspicuously silent. The usual suspects who would normally rally to defend a fellow progressive Democrat from conservative attacks were nowhere to be found. The silence spoke volumes about how damaging Owens' evidence really was. Crockett herself remained quiet for nearly 24 hours after the confrontation, finally releasing a statement through her press secretary that read, "Congresswoman Crockett stands by her record of fighting for her constituents. Personal attacks and conspiracy theories don't change the fact that communities need investment, not just incarceration," but the statement only made things worse by framing Owens' documented evidence as conspiracy theories. Crockett appeared to be dismissing legitimate questions about her family's financial dealings. Even friendly media outlets like MSNBC seemed reluctant to defend her too strongly. The political implications extended far beyond just one congresswoman's reputation. Conservative strategists immediately recognized the broader significance of what had happened. Owens hadn't just defeated Crockett in a debate. She provided a blueprint for challenging progressive politicians who had grown comfortable operating without serious scrutiny. "This changes everything," said a senior Republican strategist who spoke on condition of anonymity. "For too long, progressive politicians have been able to hide behind identity politics and emotional appeals. Candace just showed that when you do your homework and present facts methodically, those defenses crumble." The impact on Crockett's political future was immediate and severe. Within 48 hours, House Ethics Committee announced they would be opening an investigation into potential conflicts of interest related to her husband's consulting contracts. 3 major Democratic donors quietly pulled their support for her 2024 re-election campaign. More significantly, Crockett's role as a progressive media darling evaporated overnight. TV bookers who had previously competed to get her on their shows suddenly stopped calling. Her social media engagement, once consistently in hundreds of thousands, dropped a fraction of its previous levels as supporters began distancing themselves from the scandal. The confrontation also elevated Owens to a new level of political influence. Conservative media outlets that had sometimes treated her as just another pundit began recognizing her as a serious political force. Her methodical research and devastating presentation had shown that she was more than just a talented speaker. She was a formidable political operator. Speaking invitations poured in from major conservative conferences and universities. Her book sales spiked. Most importantly, her approach to political combat, thorough research, methodical presentation, and relentless focus on facts became a model that other conservative commentators began emulating. Behind the scenes, the preparation that had led to Owens' victory was even more impressive than what viewers had witnessed. Sources close to Owens revealed that she had spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, anticipating that Crockett would eventually appear on CNN to promote her police reform bill. Her research team had compiled over 200 pages of documents, financial records, and public filings related to Crockett's family business dealings. Candace doesn't just show up and wing it, revealed a member of her research team who spoke on condition of anonymity. She treats every major media appearance like a legal case. Every claim has to be documented, every fact triple-checked, every potential counterargument anticipated. The depth of preparation showed when Crockett had tried to deflect by attacking Owens' personal background. Owens was ready with her own powerful counter-narrative about surviving racial violence. When Crockett had attempted to frame the financial questions as irrelevant personal attacks, Owens had the business registration. Documents showing direct involvement, every escape route had been anticipated and blocked. This level of preparation stood in stark contrast to Crockett's approach. Sources within Democratic circles revealed that Crockett's team had prepared her for typical conservative talking points about crime statistics and police funding, but they had completely missed the financial vulnerability. Her staff had apparently never conducted the kind of deep opposition research on their own candidate. That Owens' team had performed the failure highlighted a broader problem within progressive political circles: the assumption that mainstream media appearances would remain friendly territory for years. Democratic politicians had grown accustomed to sympathetic interviewers and softball questions. The idea that a conservative opponent might come armed with detailed financial documents seemed to have never occurred to Crockett's preparation team. Political insiders began comparing Owens' performance to some of the most effective political takedowns in recent memory. Her systematic demolition of Crockett's credibility reminded many of Chris Christie's destruction of Marco Rubio during the 2016 Republican primary debates, but with even more devastating documentation. The difference is that Christie was working with talking points and political instincts. Noted veteran political strategist Rick Wilson Owens came with a prosecutor's case file. She didn't just embarrass Crockett, she potentially ended her career. The impact on other progressive politicians was immediate and chilling. Several Democratic representatives quietly hired new opposition research firms to audit their own financial backgrounds, terrified that they might be the next target of an Owens-style investigation. The comfortable assumption that progressive politicians could operate without serious scrutiny had been shattered in a single CNN segment. The broader impact on political discourse was equally significant. The confrontation demonstrated that the era of progressive politicians operating with friendly media environments and unchallenged narratives might be ending. Other Democratic politicians began quietly reviewing their own financial disclosures and business relationships, worried that they might be the next target of a similar expose. Republican opposition researchers started following the Owens model, diving deeper into financial records and business relationships of their political opponents. Democratic strategists found themselves playing defense in ways they hadn't experienced in years. The generational aspect of the conflict also resonated powerfully with voters. Here were two young black women representing completely different visions of America's future. Crockett represented a progressive vision, systemic change, identity-focused politics, and government solutions to social problems. Owens represented the conservative, alternative individual responsibility, colorblind merit, and free market solutions. The fact that Owens had so thoroughly defeated Crockett suggested to many observers that the conservative message might be more persuasive than progressives had assumed, especially when delivered by someone who couldn't be dismissed as privileged or out of touch. Political scientists began analyzing the confrontation as a potential turning point in American politics. Dr. Michael Henderson of Louisiana State University wrote in his analysis, "This wasn't just a debate victory, it was a demonstration that conservative principles, when articulated by credible messengers with strong preparation, can defeat progressive rhetoric even in hostile media environments." The long-term consequences continue to unfold. Crockett's political career remains in jeopardy, with polling in her district showing her approval ratings down nearly 20 points since the confrontation. Several potential primary challengers have emerged. Sensing weakness, meanwhile, Owens has leveraged her victory into increased influence within conservative circles. Her research-based approach to political combat has been adopted by other conservative figures, creating a more effective opposition to progressive politicians who had grown accustomed to soft treatment from mainstream media. The confrontation also highlighted the growing importance of social media and political discourse. The fact that clips of the debate were viewed tens of millions of times across platforms showed that traditional media gatekeepers no longer control political narratives the way they once did. A single, devastating moment can now reach more people than an entire evening of traditional television programming. Perhaps most significantly, the Owens-Crockett confrontation demonstrated that political success in the modern era requires more than just compelling rhetoric or identity-based appeals. It requires thorough preparation, factual accuracy, and the ability to defend one's record under serious scrutiny. As political observers continue to analyze the long-term implications of this confrontation, one thing is clear: Candace Owens didn't just win a debate, she provided a masterclass in how to effectively challenge progressive politicians, and the lessons from her victory are already being applied across a conservative movement. The question now is whether other progressive politicians will learn from Crockett's mistakes, or whether they'll continue operating under the assumption that their previous media advantages will protect them from serious scrutiny. Based on the evidence from this confrontation, that assumption might prove to be very costly. The Owens victory also sparked a broader conversation about the role of preparation in political success. Political science professors began using the confrontation as a case study in their classes, highlighting how thorough research and strategic presentation could overcome advantages in media positioning and narrative control. Dr. Sarah Martinez of Georgetown University incorporated the CNN segment into her political communication course. This confrontation demonstrates that in the modern media environment, preparation and documentation can be more powerful than traditional political advantages. Owens neutralized every institutional advantage Crockett possessed through superior preparation and strategic thinking. Educational impact extended beyond academia. Conservative organizations began hosting training sessions based on the Owens model of political engagement. These workshops focused on research methodology, document organization, and strategic confrontation techniques. The goal was to create an army of conservative advocates who could replicate Owens' success in their own political encounters. Young conservative activists particularly embraced the new approach. Campus conservative groups reported surge in membership as students sought to learn Owens' methodical style of political engagement. The traditional image of conservative activism as purely emotional or ideological began shifting toward a more evidence-based prosecutorial model. Training materials developed by conservative think tanks began emphasizing investigative skills alongside traditional political talking points. New recruits were taught to file Freedom of Information Act requests, analyze financial disclosures, and cross-reference public records with political statements. The goal was to ensure that future conservative advocates would arrive at political battles as well as Owens had been. The ripple effects reached into campaign politics as well. Republican candidates at all levels began investing more heavily in opposition research, particularly focusing on business relationships and financial entanglements of their Democratic opponents. Campaign managers reported that potential donors were specifically asking whether their research teams could deliver Owens-level documentation of opponent vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, progressive organizations found themselves scrambling to develop counter-strategies. Some began advocating for more defensive preparation, training their politicians to anticipate and deflect research-based attacks. Others pushed for even more aggressive identity-based responses, arguing that conservatives like Owen should be attacked for betraying their racial identity rather than engaged on substantive issues. The split in progressive strategy revealed deeper tensions within the movement about how to respond to effective conservative opposition. The old playbook of dismissing conservative critics as racist or out of touch simply didn't work when the critic was articulate black woman armed with documented evidence. 6 months after the confrontation, the political landscape had shifted noticeably. Conservative commentators across the board had adopted more research-intensive approaches to their media appearances. Opposition research had become a standard component of conservative media preparation, with firms specializing in financial background checks experiencing a surge in demand. The long-term cultural impact may prove even more significant than immediate political consequences. The confrontation demonstrated that conservative voices, when properly prepared and strategically positioned, could dominate mainstream media environments that had previously been considered hostile territory. This realization energized conservative activists and provided a template for future engagements. As political observers continue to study this confrontation, it's clear that Candace Owens didn't just score debate victory, she fundamentally altered the dynamics of political discourse. Her success proved that facts preparation and strategic thinking could overcome institutional media bias and narrative control. The lesson for political figures across the spectrum is unmistakable in an era of social media and instant fact-checking. Your record is your vulnerability. Those who hope to survive in a modern political arena must be prepared to defend every aspect of their background against opponents who have done their homework. For Owens, the victory establisher is more than just a conservative commentator. She became a political force capable of ending careers and reshaping conversations. For Crockett, the defeat served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of complacency in an increasingly competitive political environment. Thanks for watching this breakdown of one of the most explosive political confrontations in recent memory. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss our coverage of the next major political showdown, because in today's political climate, you never know when the next bombshell moment will drop. We'll be here to break it all down for you.